Star Trek Picard has definitely been a disappointment, but after galumphing its way through 2 seasons of garbage, Season 3 of Picard was surprisingly watchable. The irony is that this jump in quality is what made watching Picard Season 3 rather melancholy for me, because the show is an abject exercise in nostalgic optimism, a return to the good old days of Star Trek The Next Generation. And yet, in the 30 years since TNG first aired, the ideology that underpinned Star Trek
to boldly go where no one has gone before
has died a long, slow death, leaving behind a hollow, commodified shell that speaks to a dream that none of us hold anymore, which just makes Star Trek feel kinda depressing. Allow me to explain. See, Star Trek wasn't just an excellent sci-fi TV show. For a lot of people, it inspired a worldview, an ideal, a dream of a united humanity that had abolished war, class structures, racism, sexism, and economic strife.
We've eliminated hunger, want, the need for possessions,
and had dedicated itself to the pursuits of exploration, understanding, and empathy. Socialism. While Star Trek obviously didn't invent this dream, it was certainly the torchbearer for this narrative in popular media since the 60s with the original series. But with the fall of the Soviet Union in the 90s and the rise of neoliberal globalized capitalism as an absolute hegemony, society has never been more divided or unequal. Falling real wages for the working class, the ecological disaster, the return of far-right leaders across the globe, the destabilization of democracy by social media.
War! War everywhere!
For all our technological innovations towards the Star Trek reality, Gene Roddenberry's dream of a global utopia seems more impossible than ever. This shift is evidenced by New Star Trek and its distinctly darker, more action-oriented tone. In New Star Trek, Starfleet is almost always corrupt, militaristic, and borderline fascist. The answer to every problem is almost always a gunfight, punching, or military strategy. And with America apparently going through a bit of an identity crisis at the moment...
Don't ever use the word smart with me. Don't ever use that word.
Oh, give me a break.
Because you know what? There's nothing smart about you, Joe.
Mainstream American screenwriters seem to be waking up to the prospect that even democratic societies with supposedly free citizens can sometimes have questionable motives and a sketchy past. So Starfleet is no longer seen as an ethical organization of explorers, but as a bully that has yet to face reckoning for the sins of its past. Basically, Starfleet is now just America, instead of it being an international organization that transcends the boundaries of borders, racial divides, and religion. The first couple of seasons of Picard are almost exclusively focused on these issues. Picard's guilt over the death of the Romulan refugees in Season 1, the portrayal of the alternate timeline in Season 2 where Starfleet is literally a fascist military organization. These aren't musings on the human condition, they're thinly veiled social commentaries on modern American politics. And what's the solution they present? Punch the right bad guy in the face and it all works out. That's my problem with New Trek. For all their attempts to be socially inclusive with their casting, their attempts at criticizing American politics, they have ironically made Starfleet more America-centric and less inclusive. They have lost the essence of what makes Star Trek special. It is not just social critique masquerading as science fiction. It was a vision for what life could be like on the other end of the revolutionary cause. What happens after we meet the needs and wants of our society and we do away with oppressive structures and despotic rulers? That's why I always liked how Star Trek left the question of how society arrived at the point of global utopia rather vague. It wasn't about that. It was about where we are going as a species and why. And that brings me to Star Trek Picard Season 3. Since they faced a lot of backlash for the direction they took with Star Trek Discovery and Picard, the studio quickly dropped most of its new cast and dragged the old cast out of retirement. And it worked. Here's some things I loved about Season 3. Riker's plotline about losing his son and subsequent depression, leading to the dissolution of his marriage with Deanna Troi. Worf finally getting to look like a badass instead of just being the goofy dude that must take the fall to make the bad guy look more menacing. Geordi emoting the shit out of it with his new non-visored eyes. And space jellyfish. Despite all that though, it was kinda distracting how absolutely geriatric a lot of these actors look. And that's not a knock on them, they're humans, they age, obviously. And they all deliver great performances in season 3. But it just made me think, is this an admission of defeat? That we cannot reimagine Star Trek for the modern era with new characters and actors? Because let's be real, Picard season 3 was still very much new Trek. It has all the same traits. The primacy of nostalgia, the emphasis on violence and action, personal stakes being elevated above philosophical beliefs. For example, Picard is trying to save his son, Jack Crusher, from the bad guys that want to take him away. Why? Not just because it's the right thing to do, but because
he's my son.
And what's the solution? Throw an asteroid at the bad guys. Not talking or diplomacy or the triumph of reason, but raw violence.
Will, did you just throw an asteroid?
Goddamn right I did.
In this way, Picard Season 3 suffers from a lot of the same issues that all of new Star Trek suffers from. They have become action-adventure movies where nuance is hand-waved away, where peaceful, diplomatic solutions are viewed as naive or utopian, and the very idea of solidarity and cooperation are undermined by the corrupt institutions that govern them. So why did Picard work better for me than previous seasons? Well, I have to admit it's because the writers successfully hacked my brain. I couldn't help but feel nostalgic for the TNG characters I'd grown up with, and I couldn't help but enjoy the return to the optimism and humanistic quality of Star Trek. Take a look at the end credits of Season 3. It's like something from a Star Trek museum, a reverential ode to a dying era. And no matter how old the actors looked, there was something comforting about seeing their faces again, watching them re-establish those old relationships that had made the show work so well, and watching them overcome their differences and learn to trust each other again was genuinely heartwarming. But the whole time, I couldn't help but wonder where we go from here. Are we just going to make AI clones of Patrick Stewart and the gang and tell stories of Picard until the end of time? I certainly hope not. But I get the feeling that Star Trek is officially dead, at least for the next generation of humanity. See what I did there? Fans like me that grew up with this stuff might still give a shit, but most people seem to have walked away from this spacefaring, utopian ideal of the future. All the excitement around Elon Musk and his plans to colonize Mars seem to be slowly turning to skepticism and fear. The insane advancements in AI and robotics no longer inspire wonder but existential dread. We could have had Bernie Sanders, instead we got Trump. People are waking up to the fact that we're heading in exactly the opposite of the direction that the world of Star Trek depicts. I gotta wonder, does anyone really give a shit about seeking out new life and new civilizations anymore?
Ain't nobody got time for that.
The collective vision of the future we hold now seems not to be a utopia at all, but a techno-feudalistic dystopia, a surveillance state run by the ultra-rich where ordinary people are controlled or replaced by drones and AI. We imagine Blade Runner now, not Star Trek. And maybe you're someone that believes that sci-fi stories don't matter at all in the grand scheme of things. You're probably right, but I think our fiction and our dreams do actually matter. They form the basis on which we're able to venture into the unknown. They provide a blueprint for our imagination, beyond the purely pragmatic and habitual. In other words, if we can't dream up an alternative to dystopia, we're headed for dystopia by default. And I don't know about you, but I cannot name a single sci-fi movie I've seen lately that didn't predict some kind of dystopia. Even romances like Her spiral into the territory of existential angst. And if even Star Trek comes off as a world I wouldn't want to live in, aren't we shit out of luck for any positive visions of the future? Please correct me in the comments if you can think of any utopian depictions of the future. I for one am really hankering for a taste of optimism here, and season 3 of Picard just happened to scratch that itch. But the ideological engine of Star Trek seems to be totally busted, running on the fumes of nostalgia. So what I think we really need is a new work of science fiction, one that can make us yearn for its world the way that Star Trek did when it first aired. But that takes imagination and creativity of the sort that was on display in TNG in the 90s. If you happen to be a writer or filmmaker, I'd invite you to join me in the consideration of a simple question. What do we actually want the future to look like? Sometimes it's okay not to get stuck on the point of how we get there or how we deal with the accumulated pain and suffering of humanity on that journey, but simply to ask, where do we want to go? If you're a fan of Star Trek, Picard Season 3 will probably work really well for you, and I recommend you check it out. But if you're expecting anything as novel and exciting as those first few seasons of TNG, you're looking in the wrong place. Truly creative science fiction has retreated underground for now, or perhaps migrated to video games and anime. But I'm really hoping the positive reception to Picard Season 3 will encourage studios to take a risk or two. Hell, if they can make a show with geriatric actors and a dead ideology, I think pretty much anything goes. Anyway, thanks so much for listening. Cheers. I'll see you in the next one.